first off, it looks like I do not have the capacity to share my screen. So Susanna, or Josiah, if one of you could grant me the access to do that, that would be great. And then I also just wanted to introduce Rose Vath, who is going to be briefly speaking with me today. She is effectively my counterpart at the Agency of Transportation, AOT. She is formally, her title is the AI and Business Intelligence and Performance Manager. But we'll be working together to craft the AI go forward strategy for her agency. So Rose, if you could just take a couple minutes to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Rose Vath. I've come to the state of Vermont from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where I was working as mostly an environmental planner, but I've been in that role in our digital transformation initiatives at the USDA with a couple of different agencies, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, as well as the Farm Service Agency. My background's mostly in GIS because of the environmental aspect, but I've done a lot of different streamlining initiatives. In previous roles, I worked with the White House's Council on Environmental Quality to start reviewing use cases of AI for federal government implementation. And so yeah, obviously everyone knows that there's been a bit of a turn on the federal government side. So I'm very excited to be here at the state of Vermont. I've been on board for about a month now. And so, yeah, it's been really great. And Miles has been a really great partner. I'm hoping that with the hiring of me in the agency, it kind of allows some runway for AOT to implement, but also to kind of create a template type of process for other agencies to implement when setting their own strategies as well. So yeah, looking forward to being here. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Rose. All right, I will go ahead and share my screen then, and then we will get started with the presentation. So, looks like you can all see this okay. To start with our agenda, the first procedural thing that we need to do is approval of minutes for our last two sessions, August 1st and September 5th. So in just a moment, I'll hand that over to Susanna so that we can vote accordingly. And then I wanted to just briefly touch base on the discussion that we had at our last meeting regarding visioning. And then I know that Susanna and Josiah have some brief updates regarding the current status of our legislative priorities and a presentation that they did earlier this week for the legislature. Then I was going to discuss what Rose and I are working on in terms of developing interagency artificial intelligence strategies in a bit more detail, followed by some brief updates to the work that we are doing on updating our generative AI policies, and then lastly, our public comment. So with that being said, we'll go over to the approval of minutes for our last two sessions.
All right, I've put in the chat links to both sets of minutes that we'll need to approve for today. The first is from August 1st. The second is from September 5th. Whenever you all are ready, we'll take a motion to act on either or both.
Move we accept the 2 minutes presented.
Second.
Thanks. Motion by Phil to accept, seconded by Josiah. Any discussion? None. Love it. Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Or sit.
And I'm going to abstain because I don't have a basis for knowing if the minutes are accurate.
Thanks. We have 4 aye, 1 abstention, no other members of the council present. Minutes for 8-1. I'm sorry, Phil, was your motion for both or one?
I said, let's just do them both.
And I seconded it that way too.
That's what I'm talking. Great. That's what I'm talking about. So both sets of minutes are approved. Excellent. All right, let's move
All right.
over to an update on council. So I wanted to revisit the topic that we talked about last time. I know I raised the issue of having some sort of a visioning session for the group, and I want to be super transparent here. I did not advance that at all because it's been a really wild month, so that's completely on me. And I am going to commit to catching up on that so that we can move forward with that process. For anyone who wasn't present, that discussion really entailed this group coming together to have a session where we envision, are we still satisfied with our charge, our work plan? Do we see ourselves being able to contribute any more to the discussion around AI in Vermont? And what kinds of tasks or activities would we like to be able to contribute? So there was talk last time of perhaps having a facilitator from outside be able to help us do that kind of a session. And I think we had a lead from John Cohn. So I'm going to work after this meeting to follow up on that. And I hope to be able to bring you all some updates at our next meeting or in between. So apologize for the delay, and I'm thanking you for your patience. I think that's all that I had. Miles, do you want to talk a little bit about the interagency work?
Absolutely. Well, I know the next thing was the legislative updates. If you wanted to
you're
speak
right.
briefly about the testimony that you provided to JTAC earlier in the week.
Yep. Sorry about that. Thank you.
No worries.
Josiah, I don't know if you want to lead here or not, but I can also refresh the committee on it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So this week, maybe, Monday, yes. This past Monday, Josiah and I testified before the Joint IT Oversight Committee in our roles as AI Council members. We first updated the committee on the history of the council. We gave them a timeline covering the AI task force in 2018, all the way through the formation and most recent deliverables of this council. We talked to them about the composition of the council as it currently is. And then also we planted the seed for them that this group would be interested in potentially expanding the composition so that we could include people who could help us shift our focus toward things like workforce readiness in the AI sector of the economy. So then we proceeded to remind the committees about what our approach is to AI, seeing it as a power tool, and wanting to make sure that we're using it effectively and responsibly. We detailed a number of our deliverables, including the code of ethics, the guidelines for implementation and data management, the employee use of generative AI, including the acceptable use standard for state employees. And we talked to them and the recommendations on the future of the AI Council, which, again, has to do with an expansion in the outward facing role that we have, expanded membership, and the potential for creating a work plan. We also talked to them about what the division has been doing in terms of adopting the use of AI within state government. So we talked about how many state employees have been trained as AI change agents, how many active users we have using ChatGPT. The number, of course, is 500 plus weekly. We talked about a few of the pilots that are happening in different agencies using AI, developing AI leads in different state agencies, and the ADS is developing a next-gen AI toolkit. So then we talked a little bit about future planning. We talked about how the group wants to continue monitoring outcomes of the things that we've been talking about to make sure that we are still, that what we've recommended is being implemented in a way that we're comfortable with and that it's not creating unintended harmful outcomes for any communities. We talked a little bit about the AI Council wanting to take a focus on readying workforce, the Vermont workforce, to participate in the AI sector of the economy. We talked about a couple of the pieces of legislation that are under consideration, including one about deepfakes and about AI-related risks via public records. So trying really to respond to trends that we're seeing nationally and also get ahead of things where we can. And then we posed a question to the committees, knowing that we wouldn't get an answer, but we wanted them at least to be thinking about it, which is whether the legislature sees this council as having a regulatory role in the future. And that's pretty much it. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I mean, most of that probably sounds pretty familiar. It was a combination of our annual report that we released back in January, and then the stuff we had been discussing here over the last few weeks, so or few months. So, yeah, overall, like there wasn't. It was the end of the day. It was a half hour. I'll be blunt about that. So there wasn't a huge amount of feedback, but they appreciated the information, and there were a couple of questions, especially on the legislative proposals, the deepfakes. Yeah, and then I guess my update to that as well would be, we are still having conversations. I'm having conversations with my boss and her boss's staff about those same legislative initiatives. So we'll keep you guys apprised as we hear how those are going. But I think there will be opportunity for the council to be supportive of those legislative proposals, whoever they end up coming from. Whether those are, there have been some legislators who have brought forward, well, there's currently, I guess, an example, there's currently a deepfake and elections bill on the wall. And we're, having conversations about, well, the AI Council, like we like the model that New Jersey has put forward, which covers that and is a little bit broader, and having those types of conversations with legislature. So I think there will be opportunity for the council to be supportive of some of those once we get into session, which will start in January. So that's the update there.
All right. Well, thank you both for that update. And pending no additional thoughts or questions in this regard, we will move on to our brief update and discussion on what we're developing in terms of our interagency AI strategy. So as Rose mentioned, we are currently coordinating to develop a specific artificial intelligence strategy for the Agency of Transportation. We have been meeting to discuss this and work through many of the various unknowns that we're working on pinning down for more or less the last month since Rose came on to AOT. Big picture, our goal with this is to establish a framework that both enables the Agency of Transportation to adopt artificial intelligence in methods that's both in alignment with our code of ethics and guidelines and our general strategic framework for approaching artificial intelligence, and yet also enables AOT personnel to use AI effectively to benefit all of the various both non-technical and highly technical work that goes on at the agency. So what this looks like at a high level is that we're establishing a framework such that our Division of Artificial Intelligence will remain responsible for oversight of artificial intelligence use within the agency, as well as providing our long-term strategic guidance on what types of artificial intelligence use cases we want to prioritize. Concurrently, our division will be responsible for continuing the government-wide implementation of tools like ChatBT that AOT personnel will be using. Then thirdly, we are establishing a framework such that Rose and I, more broadly, the AI head at a given agency, and then our centralized artificial intelligence division can coordinate to establish pertinent use cases for artificial intelligence in a way such that Rose and her team and AOT more broadly have the capability to leverage their unique expertise to identify use cases that are pertinent, while at the same time, we are working in concert to ensure that those are in alignment with our strategic priorities. So really the big picture idea is that we want to empower our partner agencies to have the both the knowledge and awareness of our strategy, and also the strategic autonomy to identify what type of use cases are most pertinent for them to pursue. And obviously, they're not going to be doing that independently. But I think big picture, when coordinating with agencies, especially agencies like transportation that have significant technical and engineering expertise, I think that really big picture, we want to leverage the autonomy granted to the individual agency AI heads to the extent possible to streamline the effective identification of AI use cases that here at ADS we may not necessarily be aware of as ideal uses of technology. For example, the transportation, the AOT is using artificial intelligence in a few pilot programs for things like evaluating the conditions of crack sealant on roads using computer vision, which are highly specific use cases for that agency. Where if we're adopting a top-down approach to identifying use cases at AOT, that may not necessarily be the first thing that comes to mind for us, right, at ADS. So, you know, as we continue expanding this idea of having agency level AI leads at other agencies, we're going to continue with monthly working sessions between myself and all of the agency counterparts. Right now, we're doing so currently just with Rayford Allen, who is the data manager at the Department of Liquor and Lottery in an informal capacity. But as these formal AI roles continue to develop across the government, we will be coordinating monthly and working together to ensure strategic alignment and make sure that we're hitting the correct balance between everybody being in alignment with the code of ethics and ADS's intention with respect to operationalizing guidance from the council, but also making sure that individual agency heads have the autonomy to evaluate and bring forth pertinent AI use cases within their agency that we may not necessarily identify from our centralized capacity. So yeah, I think really we're still in the early stages of formulating, what AOT's specific strategy is going to look like and how we're going to address some of these unknowns with respect to this strategic balance that I mentioned. But the hope is that over the next several months, as we continue refining and finalize the strategy that Rose is going to be implementing for artificial intelligence going forward at AOT over 2026 and 2027. As she mentioned, our aim is that that will serve as a valuable template that will then be able to apply to this relationship with other agencies once they get to a level of maturity and establish this head AI position and can move forward with developing their own AI strategies. So yeah, big picture, I just wanted to give a brief update on what we're working on in this regard. There are still some significant unknowns. One of the things that we are working through with respect to the strategic alignment that I mentioned is the complexity in ADS needing to serve as a centralized IT authority that has oversight over our procurement process, yet also figuring out how to enable specific agencies to have the autonomy to pursue use cases and the implementation of technology under the direction of their AI heads. Because this is the first model of this relationship, that there are definitely some outstanding questions there, but those are the main things that we're working on. Before I proceed, does anybody have any thoughts or questions regarding the development of this interagency AI strategy?
I guess I'd just like to add, Miles, that I see my role as the head of AI at an agency to ensure alignment with you all as the council and ADS as their role here. But my other half of this is ensuring alignment with our other state partners at other transportation agencies. So I think there's going to be some amount in developing our strategy that maybe it doesn't always work for every agency across the state of Vermont, because we're kind of balancing two things is in being in line with so much of the infrastructure around state transportation agencies, as well as balancing on the state of Vermont side. So at this point, I think our strategy is really going to be centered or based in the Intelligent Transportation System of America framework, which really divides it out into an executive function, an operational function, and then a delivery function. And where I really see the relationship with ADS and the AI Council is under that executive function, right? Defining our policy and governance frameworks. That's where I really see the relationship developing. And then from an operational and delivery standpoint, it really comes down to what requirements do we have to meet. And that's, I think, some of the gray area of what pieces of the puzzle have to come to ADS, what pieces of the puzzle have to even go onward to the AI Council, and how do we make sure we're implementing that in a way that's not going to create roadblocks when we have an innovation in front of us. And so I think thinking through some of those questions now is what I'm hoping to do with Miles in the coming months. And overall, our team, the team that I sit on and that I manage, is our business intelligence team. And right now we rely heavily on Microsoft Power Platform. We develop a lot of different solutions using Power Automate or Power Apps. Those solutions aren't signed off by ADS. They're not signed off by anyone outside of our business owners in our function areas. And so that's where the question of will we be given the same latitude in certain spaces and certain tools, that's, I think, some of the gray area that we're going to be figuring out as we develop some of the governance structures at AOT. I think those are the questions that are inevitably going to come to Miles and then come to you all, is can we implement those solutions without having that approval? Do we have that flexibility and autonomy, like Miles had mentioned?
Well,
Rose,
thank
you had
you.
said
Go
you
ahead.
were using a particular framework. Which framework was it that you're leaning on?
It's and I can send it in the chat. It's the Intelligent Transportation System of America, ITSA. And it's not exactly a governance framework, but it's more of an implementation plan. And we really use ITSA a lot. It's very aligned with it's ASHTO. I cannot remember the acronym, but it's the Association of like State Transportation Agencies, essentially. And those are kind of a public-private partnership between ITSA and ASHTO. And so everyone in the transportation, we're kind of midstream. We're like early adopters, but we're certainly not the first on the transportation side. And so relying on some of our partners like Texas DOT, North Carolina DOT, Georgia DOT, as well as even Utah, right? There's a lot of people who have been implementing a use case style solicitation throughout the agency of what use cases to move forward with. Not a whole lot of operationalizing at this point, but I think using those existing frameworks that others have used in other state transportation agencies, it seems like leveraging those, lessons learned is where we also want to try to sit, so we stay kind of in line with what other state transportation agencies are doing, and we're not out there recreating the wheel just for Vermont. So
Cool. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rose, for expanding on that. Does anybody else have any other questions before we move on? I will note that towards the end of my part of this presentation, I am planning to open it up to discuss a couple of these outstanding questions in a little bit more detail, but I wanted to briefly discuss where we're sitting now in terms of updates to our policy landscape first, just to also help frame that discussion. So in terms of our ongoing AI policy work, which, as I mentioned last week, ties in closely with education. On the education side, we are continuing with the development of the module that I mentioned we're working on in association with the Center for Achievement in Public Service, CAPS, over at DHR. We reviewed a first draft of the storyboard for the module. They're currently working now on operationalizing that into a draft of the actual module itself. And then from there, we will review that. And then the aim is to have it accessible within approximately the next 30 days or so. As I mentioned last month, this initial educational module is really just a broad overview of what artificial intelligence is, what types of AI workers are likely to interact with during both their day-to-day business at the state of Vermont and then also just in their private personal lives. And then it's going to provide guidance on using our state's AI tools, predominantly with the focus on ChatBT, but the intent is for those usage guidelines to be applicable to other tools as well. So really that this initial education module is going to be effectively just a baseline so that hopefully we can get state employees up to a consistent level of familiarity with the basics of artificial intelligence and how to use AI tools. Our intent is to initially make it available for anyone who elects to take it. We're expecting to see some pretty significant interest in that regard. Once we make this initial baseline module available, our intent is to continue developing some more advanced and detailed coursework that's going to be focused on, I guess we would say, power users or early adopters of artificial intelligence. And this will go into a little bit more detail about how AI works from a technical perspective, as well as how to use some of the more advanced features of AI tools like ChatGPT to do more complex work with documents and setting up knowledge repositories that the average user may not be familiar with. I think from there, the plan is to incorporate the feedback that we receive from the first baseline module, which is initially going to be available for employees to take voluntarily. Then pending the feedback and the reception of that initial module, we may make some modifications for it to it. And then from there, the plan is to, at some point in 2026, incorporate it into our new employee onboarding process so that it will be taken by all employees when they join the state. And then we also want to incorporate it into the framework that we have for security training, such that artificial intelligence training will be taken on a similar pace and will be required for all employees, likely at an annual basis or something to that effect. So at a high level, that's what we're thinking in terms of our internal education policies and plan. Concurrently, we are also working on some updates to our AI usage guidelines that I think will help facilitate our education, give people a little bit more information about how to effectively use these AI tools and reduce a little bit of confusion regarding which tools are okay to use, and then how to identify uses that are unacceptable. So this is just a very kind of high level example of how I look at our current policy environment. This obviously isn't comprehensive, but our main overarching guide for the usage of artificial intelligence here at the state is obviously our code of ethics. I see this as somewhat of a more future-proof or future-resistant document that covers all usage and implementation of AI from a high-level strategic perspective that is agnostic to specific technologies, or at least to the extent that it was possible to do that when the document was developed. Then within that, we have our guidelines for the usage of content generating artificial intelligence. These are the day-to-day guidelines that we refer employees to if they have questions about whether or not a given use case is acceptable for artificial intelligence. This level of policy is going to be the policy framework that we incorporate into our education. The module that we're working on with CAPS frequently references the guidelines document. Essentially, our intention is for employees to be familiar with the code of ethics at a high level and know where to find it. And then we expect them to be conversant and able to clearly articulate the details of the guidelines for the usage of content generating AI. As we mentioned at our last meeting, though, I noted that it may make sense to edit the guidelines to more broadly encompass other modalities aside from chatbots, because this guidelines document is highly focused on that specific modality of generative artificial intelligence. And then the council had the idea of creating an additional third policy that sort of sits between these two and broadens the coverage of the guidelines to additional modalities of artificial intelligence. So that's the new policy that we're currently working on. The intent is to take the fundamental tenets of the guidelines for the usage of content generating AI, but expand it to other AI modalities, things like artificial intelligence integrated with other systems, which I mentioned last month is an increasingly common trend in the AI space that's only going to accelerate. Things like other types of AI tools, such as AI meeting assistants and things like AI case management systems for social workers. Really, there's a number of tools that would fall within this scope, and it's expanding continually as time goes on, as we discussed last month. One of the key things that I want to get across in this new policy is that teams throughout the state should really be empowered and feel like they have a policy to fall back on when they have to make challenging or potentially uncomfortable decisions regarding AI usage by third parties that they interact with. The common example here that I've come across several times in my few months here is groups throughout the state entering Teams calls with third parties like their vendors or any other third parties who then in turn join the calls with AI meeting assistants. And I want to make sure that teams throughout the state feel like they have a specific policy they can fall back on to make decisions requesting or rather requiring that those AI meeting assistants be turned off if they feel uncomfortable with respects to the confidentiality or the sensitive nature of what's being discussed in the meeting. This is just, I'm still drafting the policy, but this is a high level overview of the purpose and scope. Essentially, my aim is to give additional context on how to effectively operationalize the code of ethics for the use of tools across the state. And it's essentially an expansion in scope of the guidelines on the use of generative artificial intelligence that will cover some of the other broader applications that I mentioned. And then I think critically, I also want to ensure that it explicitly grants agencies the right to make their own informed decisions regarding the usage of AI tools by third parties to make sure that those tools aren't being used for anything that potentially compromises the AI code of ethics, and specifically our requirement to use AI tools in a transparent manner and a manner that ensures the privacy and security of our constituents' data. So with that in mind, these are the 5 points from our guidelines on the use of generative artificial intelligence that I'm essentially incorporating into this updated policy, but just with a broader scope that's not specifically referring to the chatbot modality. So that the first is that obviously any use needs to continue to adhere to our personnel policy and the AI code of ethics. Preventing the use of sensitive and confidential data with public tools. To me, that's a consistent requirement, regardless of whether the tool is an AI chatbot or a meeting assistant or any other type of tool that we're likely to come across in our day-to-day work. Presently, I am also planning to include a requirement for supervisory approval for all initial usage of a given AI tool. And then similarly to the guidelines, as they currently exist, any purchase is going to continue to need to go through our mandated ADS state procurement process. And then, of course, lastly, ensuring the accuracy, reviewing the output, and avoiding reputational harm will remain a requirement regardless of what specific tool is being used. Josiah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is good. I think I'm inclined to say that the supervisory approval was within the bounds of the chatbot modality. That was where we kind of the council and then the division delegated the review authority within the chatbot modality within kind of a box. Supervisors could approve use cases within that box. I'm thinking that if this is beyond that modality, we may want to have, for now, a more significant level of approval for those use cases. And then once we identify some other boxes that we can kind of pre-approve generally, as long as it fits in this box, supervisors can approve it. Like take that flavor of approach. is what I'm thinking. Just because the rest of the universe beyond chatbots is kind of a much bigger thing that's much harder to pin down. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that absolutely makes sense. And I think you make a great point that for novel tools that have not previously been used at the state, I agree that approval process should go through ADS and continue going through the Division of Artificial Intelligence. So thank you for that as well.
Todd, are you trying to chime in? I guess it's breaking up a little bit.
No, I think my phone came off mute accidentally. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
No worries. Cool. So then in terms of the language for giving agencies and teams the comfort to manage AI tool use by third parties, I was thinking something like this. So agencies, departments, and teams have the authority to manage AI tool use during interactions with any third parties. This includes the right to request or require third parties to disable any tools like AI meeting assistants that are unwanted if the agency or team feels that the use is not in alignment with our code of ethics. And I understand that currently, as our policies are written, agencies throughout the state have the responsibility to do this anyway, but I've gotten enough questions about this type of usage by third parties that I do think it makes sense to write a policy that agencies can specifically fall back on and point to if they do need to make this type of decision in communication or contact with the third party. But at a high level, does this approach make sense? Do you guys think that this makes sense as something to formally include?
Phil and Joe, especially, I'd love your thoughts. Like if your organizations have something similar to this, where you've got some standard language around if somebody outside brings an AI assistant to a meeting, like you can kick it out. Is that something you all already have?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think we have anything like that. We have some very minimal language around like what kind of AI people are expected to use if they want to use a chatbot, but beyond chatbots, we've got nothing.
Okay. Thanks.
I believe the practice is to ask people to turn off their recording agents. That being said, I know the CIO for the university uses one, and it shows up before he does for most meetings. So it's
excellent.
It's just, but I tell him to shut it off if I have a meeting with him. But that's a personal preference. That's not a that's not a rule. I can't even get him not to use the owls.
Yeah, that's yeah. Okay, thanks. That's kind of where we were at too. Where like we've said, folks, you're welcome to tell people to turn it off. We just want to give people some explicit, like, something to tie to, because sometimes there's pushback on that or whatever. So cool.
Yeah,
thank
you.
I think that's a great idea.
So
I just want to endorse the idea. I think it's a great idea to, in an organization of your size, to be able to have that policy guidance for people to draw upon. So I support your effort, whichever way you decide to go.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think it is in many respects a complex problem, because these AI meeting assistants can be legitimately helpful, and we've considered some use cases of similar tools that we would like to incorporate into our own internal procedures. For example, when we're offboarding employees who have been with the state for years and years, they have a wealth of knowledge, and using these types of assistants to aid in transcribing offboarding calls could potentially be a really valuable way to leverage AI to develop procedures based on the information that they've gathered over their time with the state. We haven't operationalized that, but that is just one example of a benefit. But yeah, I do think big picture, enabling agencies and departments to make this kind of decision and have some policy to fall back on will be helpful in instances where they're having calls discussing confidential or sensitive data.
The ultimate question, Miles, that comes to me when we think about this, and what my rationale is I don't know where the data is going to go. So,
Right,
so you
yeah.
come into a meeting with me, I don't know where that's going to go, and I'm not sure I necessarily want that information shared in that place. Versus you as a person, the chat bot or whatever you're using can put it someplace else, and it can then become part of something else. And that's my beyond my personal risk tolerance.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And one of the other challenges is that where the data will go for a given meeting assistant is impossible to know on the spot. It requires reviewing their security and privacy policies. We have a couple that we've proactively identified that do present significant security risks, so we block the usage of those tools. But yeah, it is really challenging to evaluate on an ad hoc basis, and I just want to make sure that people are comfortable saying no if they're not sure. So thank you. And then we have just a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to use some time to open up these questions for discussion. And for context here, I'm not really thinking about these questions in terms of operationalizing this anytime soon, but as we continue expanding our education efforts across the state, one of the things that I've been thinking about and discussing with Rose is that, say that we're in a world in a couple years where our education rollout has been effective and comprehensive. We have metrics that we can refer to, in order to effectively track that, so it's not just based on our feeling. That's my ultimate vision for where we're going to be at educationally here pretty soon, is that this rollout is effective. Everybody in the state is required to take our AI education modules. They work, they're engaging. When we get to a point in the future where folks are more educated on some of these unknowns and points of confusion with regards to the usage of AI and whether or not a given use falls within what's acceptable given our guidelines and our code of ethics, I'm curious to see if it would be feasible or if it may make sense to adjust our requirements for supervisory approval and potentially our procurement process to streamline the adoption of artificial intelligence in circumstances where it's safe to grant that autonomy. And I know that this is kind of vague and general, but taking one example, we previously discussed a few minutes ago the necessity of having centralized ADS approval for novel AI use cases. The way our guidelines are currently written right now, for the chatbot guidelines, supervisory approval is required for any use of an AI chatbot in work operations. And I would just be curious to hear your thoughts on whether or not you can envision potentially streamlining these processes in the future, just to make it a little bit easier for agencies to have the autonomy to use AI for novel things, and for them to procure artificial intelligence solutions in a more streamlined way. Amanda, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, for the piece about requiring supervisory approval, it's one of those things that I understand in theory, but in practice, one, you're assuming that the supervisor knows enough to approve or disapprove, which there's no like module, as far as I'm concerned, in supervisor training about this. I haven't been in supervisor training in 7 years, so it could have been updated. And then the second one, there's no way to be accountable for that from the supervisory thing, or like, is this going to be part of like routine check-ins with employees? Like, it's more like, how would one operationalize that to make an effective requirement? It maybe is what I'm saying, because you can put it down there, but if you really want it followed, there will need to be some recommendations in that space, is what I would say.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I actually took the supervisory training on Monday, and there was no discussion on approval of AI use cases, so I can confirm that. Josiah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the original, back when we were talking about this for chatbots, the original idea was chatbots are generally okay, but it's supervisors or potentially their managers who own the process where work gets done, right? It's either a manager or a supervisor, and it depends a little bit on the org structure, but like somebody's responsible for what the process looks like. And that's really where we were going, right? Like if you're using a chat bot, you are changing the process by which work gets done in the state, and you need to check with whoever is the process owner in order to do that. And I think that that's still, I think that that is appropriate over the long term, but I think maybe we could add some clarity around, it's really whoever is the process owner, whether that's like, it might not always be a supervisor. Often the supervisors aren't. Sometimes it's the managers. Um, and also like clarity around what does that look like for the ad hoc stuff that's not part of a standard process, the one-off tasks that get identified and people want to use AI for.
Thank you. I know we're coming right up on time, and I want to leave time for public comment if there is anything. So does anybody have any other questions on this or thoughts? Cool. Well, thank you all. And again, these are just things that we're just thinking through at a very long term right now on a theoretical basis. So obviously, I think that the feedback that you guys provided in terms of incorporating AI training into the supervisory educational process, that's a really good point. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Amanda. I'll check in with the CAPS folks. We have a pretty close working relationship right now. So I think that that's actually an adjustment that we would be able to make to the supervisor education process fairly quickly here. And then I'll put some more consideration into how we can potentially adjust the guidance that we're providing to supervisors to make it clear that the central theme here is less of just a requirement for supervisory approval and more ensuring that any process owners are responsible and thoroughly understand the processes that they're managing. So yes, thank you all.
All right. Anybody who is here who is not a member of the council, but who would like to address the council, you can feel free to do so in the chat, or you can come off mute. All right. Well then, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
But you need a motion for that. So Phil's going to motion for it, I bet.
Oh, geez.
So moved.
Thanks, Phil.
And I'll second.
Ooh, sorry. I did not really allow enough time for last comments. There is a chat that I just want to make sure that we see, and we may just have to get to it next time. The question comes to us from our AGO rep, who asks whether we've had coordination with the Judiciary's AI Advisory Board, and mentions that the Judiciary has been working on some of this stuff too.
And Susanna, I'm happy to just follow up with Josiah or Miles or whoever makes sense. It doesn't need to be conversation.
Perfect.
Thank you.
That'd be great, Todd. Yeah, we've had limited engagement, so that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Happy to do that. And
All
I
right,
vote
so on the
aye
table.
chat.
Oh, great. Okay. All others, all in favor of the adjourning?
Aye.
All right. Get out of here, you kids.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Good weekend, everyone.